I was never enough. Not for my parents, not for my family. No matter how hard I tried, straight A's, trophies, scholarships, it didn't matter. Because I wasn't Jen. Jen, the golden child, the perfect daughter, the one who could do no wrong, even when she was on her third wedding while I was still paying off my student loans. The final betrayal came when I found out that the college fund my grandmother had left me was gone. Not misplaced. Not forgotten. Drained. Every cent spent on Jen's fairy tale wedding designer dress, oceanfront venue, a honeymoon in the Maldives. I remember standing in my parents' living room, clutching the bank statement in my shaking hands. My mother had the audacity to look annoyed. "You have a full scholarship, Mel," she said, as if that excused stealing from me. Dad just sighed. "Don't make this a big deal." I did, though. I made it the biggest deal of my life. That night, I packed my bags and left. If I wasn't enough for them, they sure as hell weren't enough for me. It took years to claw my way up. With the help of my Aunt Pat, I scraped through college, working 3 jobs just to keep myself afloat. It was hell, but I made it. I built a life. I found happiness. Now, at 28, I have everything they said I wouldn't. A career as a financial analyst, a husband who loves me, Dan, a lawyer with a wicked sense of humor and the patience of a saint, a beautiful, peaceful life. And then, after 8 years of silence, my parents called. The first time, I let it go to voicemail. The second time, I blocked the number. Then my mother emailed me, begging me to meet them for lunch, just to talk, she wrote. Against my better judgment, I agreed. A small, stupid part of me still wanted to believe they had changed. That maybe, just maybe, they missed me. We met at a quiet little cafe downtown. They looked older, more tired, but there was no warmth in their smiles. No remorse. "Mel, sweetheart," my mother began, reaching for my hand. "We need your help." I pulled away. "Of course you do." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't love. It was a request. Jen was in trouble again. 4 divorces deep, and now she was planning to chase some guy across the country. The problem? She had 2 kids, Ben, 7, and Lisa, 5, and apparently she had no interest in taking them with her. "We thought," Dad said carefully, "that you could take them in." I stared at them. "Are you serious?" My mother gave me a thin, placating smile. "You're in a good place now, Mel. You have a home, a stable income, and Jen doesn't," I finished bitterly. Dad sighed. "They need family, Mel." I laughed. Actually laughed. "You mean like I needed family? When I was working 3 jobs just to eat? When I had nowhere to go? When you stole my college fund to pay for Jen's wedding?" Mom's face twisted. "That was years ago, and this is now," I snapped. And my answer is no. I walked out without another word. That night, Dan and I curled up on the couch, watching an old sitcom, his arm wrapped around me. I felt lighter, relieved, proud of myself for saying no. Then, at 11 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Confused, I got up, peering through the peephole, and my stomach dropped. 2 little figures stood outside, shivering in the cold, Ben and Lisa. I threw the door open. They were bundled in thin coats, their cheeks red from the wind. Ben clutched a crumpled piece of paper in his mittened hands. He held it out to me with trembling fingers. I unfolded it, my hands shaking. The note was short, hastily scrawled, "Your problem now. Don't ruin this for me." It was signed by Jen. I felt the blood drain from my face. Did she just leave you here?" I whispered. Ben nodded, his lower lip wobbling. "She said you'd take care of us." Lisa sniffled, rubbing her eyes with tiny fists. "I'm cold." Dan was already behind me, his face set in hard lines. "Call CPS," he said. I hesitated. I should have been furious. I should have wanted to hand them off to someone else, to let someone else deal with Jen's mess. But as I looked at them, Ben, small but protective, standing in front of his sister like a little soldier, I felt something shift inside me, because I knew exactly how it felt to be unwanted. I knelt down, pulling them into a hug. "It's okay," I whispered. "You're safe now." And I meant it. The night Jen abandoned her kids on my doorstep, everything changed. Dan called CPS while I made them hot chocolate, trying to keep my hands from shaking. Lisa curled up on my couch, holding the mug with both hands like it was the only thing keeping her warm. Ben sat stiffly beside her, his little body tense, his eyes darting to the front door like he expected his mom to come back. She wouldn't. I knew that, and deep down I think he did too. When the social worker arrived, she was kind but professional. She asked Ben and Lisa soft questions. How long had they been alone? Did they know where their mom went? Ben's jaw tightened. She said she'd be back, he muttered. My heart broke a little right then, because I knew that tone, that desperate hope, that need to believe, even when the truth was clear. Lisa just sucked her thumb and leaned against me. The social worker sighed, scribbling notes. We need to place them somewhere safe while we investigate. I expected relief. I should have felt relief. But the thought of them going to strangers made my stomach twist. They can stay here, I said before I could stop myself. Dan turned to me, eyebrows raised. Temporarily, I added quickly. Just until things get sorted. The social worker nodded. We'll need to do a quick home check, but if you're willing, that would be ideal. An hour later, after paperwork and a brief inspection, she left. The kids were officially in my care. Dan ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. Are we really doing this? I glanced at Ben and Lisa. Lisa was already asleep on the couch, her tiny hand curled into a fist. Ben sat upright, fighting sleep, like he was afraid to let his guard down. I can't let them go through the system, I said softly. Not when they have us. Dan rubbed his face, then nodded. All right, we'll figure it out. We always did. I thought I knew exhaustion. College. Late night deadlines. Juggling 3 jobs just to make rent. None of that compared to waking up at 5 a.m. because Lisa had a nightmare, or trying to convince Ben that he didn't need to check the locks 5 times before bed. They'd been through more than I realized. The CPS investigation uncovered what I feared. Jen hadn't just been neglecting them. She'd been leaving them alone for days at a time. Ben had been the one making Lisa's meals, keeping her safe, getting her to school. 7 years old, and he'd already learned how to survive. I sat with him one night while Lisa slept, a plate of untouched food in front of him. You don't have to take care of everything, I told him. He shrugged. Somebody has to. I reached over, gently squeezing his hand. Not anymore. For the first time, he looked unsure. Trust wasn't something that happened overnight, but little by little, cracks formed in the walls he'd built. Lisa adjusted faster. She clung to me like a baby koala, happy to finally have someone who noticed her. She talked nonstop, about her favorite colors, yellow and pink, about how she wanted to be a princess, about how she thought Dan's beard was scratchy but nice. Ben, though, he was harder. He didn't laugh easily. He didn't complain, even when I knew he was struggling, until the snowstorm. It hit in the middle of January, trapping us inside for 2 days. Schools shut down, the roads iced over, and suddenly, we were all stuck in the house together. Lisa loved it. She spent the whole day making paper crowns and declaring herself queen of the couch. Ben sat by the window, watching the snow fall, quiet, stiff. I sat next to him. What's up? He hesitated, then finally asked, She's not coming back, is she? My chest ached. I wanted to lie, to tell him Jen might come around, that she might fix herself, but I wouldn't do that to him. No, I said gently. She's not. He nodded, eyes fixed on the glass. Okay. And then, finally, he leaned against me. Just for a second. Just enough to let me know that maybe, just maybe, he was starting to believe he wasn't alone anymore. I wrapped an arm around him and whispered, I've got you, kid. And I meant it. I used to think my life was settled. Simple. Wake up, go to work, come home, spend the evening with Dan, rinse and repeat. But now I was waking up to Lisa jumping on my bed at 6 a.m. and Ben sleepily muttering, Lisa, stop. You're gonna get us in trouble. She never listened. Dan and I had gone from peaceful weekends to navigating school drop-offs, tantrums, and a 7-year-old who didn't trust adults. It was an adjustment, but the strangest part, it didn't feel wrong. It felt right. That didn't mean it was easy. Lisa adapted fast, but Ben, he was still holding his breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. One night, I walked into his room to find him sitting on the edge of his bed, already dressed, jacket zipped, shoes on. His backpack sat beside him. My stomach twisted. Ben, what are you doing? His fingers tightened around the straps. Just getting ready. For what? He shrugged, avoiding my eyes. In case we have to leave. I sat down next to him, heart aching. You don't have to be ready to run, I said softly. You're not going anywhere. He didn't answer. Didn't believe me yet. I pulled the blanket over his lap. I know it's hard to trust that, I admitted. But we're not like her. We're not leaving you. His small hands gripped the fabric. That's what she used to say. I swallowed. There was nothing I could say to erase the past. Nothing that would magically make him believe he was safe. So I just sat with him, hoping that maybe, someday, he wouldn't need his shoes on to feel ready. I should have known it was coming. The minute CPS finalized temporary custody, my parents suddenly wanted to be involved. They showed up at my house unannounced, standing on my porch like they had any right to be here. Mom smiled like nothing had ever happened. "Melanie, sweetie, aren't you going to invite us in?" I crossed my arms. "No," Dad sighed, shaking his head. "Can we just talk?" Talk, right? Because that had worked out so well before. I stepped outside, shutting the door behind me. "Make it quick." "We heard about Jen," Mom started, her voice heavy with forced sadness. "About the kids. We had no idea things were that bad." "Bullshit. They'd known. They just hadn't cared." "We want to be in their lives," Dad added. "They're our grandchildren, Mel." I let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, now they're your grandchildren?" Mom's lips thinned. "We're trying to make amends." I stared at them, the people who had ignored me for years, the ones who had stolen from me, dismissed me, discarded me. And now that their favorite child had screwed up beyond repair, they wanted back in. Too little, too late. I shook my head. "No, you don't get to swoop in and pretend to care. Not now." Dad's face hardened. "You can't just cut us out, Melanie. We're family." "Funny. That's exactly what you did to me." Mom sighed dramatically, like I was being unreasonable. "We made mistakes, but this is about the kids." And there it was, the guilt trip, the manipulation. The "we're just trying to help" routine. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I took a deep breath. "The kids are fine. We are fine. And you can leave." They stared at me, waiting for me to crack, to back down, to give in like I always had. But I didn't. I turned around and walked back inside, locking the door behind me. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. After my parents left, I expected some kind of follow-up, more calls, an email, maybe a guilt-ridden letter about how I was being cruel for keeping the kids away. But nothing came. And that silence, it told me everything. They hadn't come because they cared. They came because they saw Jen's mess as an inconvenience, one they could pawn off on me. Now that I'd shut the door in their faces, they didn't actually want to try. Fine by me. Taking in Ben and Lisa had felt like a whirlwind at first, chaotic but manageable. But now, reality was settling in. We weren't just babysitting until Jen decided to show up again. This wasn't temporary. Lisa adjusted quickly, like a flower finally getting sunlight. She started calling me Auntie Mel without hesitation, clinging to my side like I'd always been there. Ben, though, he struggled. One night, Dan and I were in the kitchen, talking quietly while the kids watched TV in the next room. "CPS is moving to make the placement permanent," Dan said, flipping through paperwork. "If Jen doesn't contest it in the next month, we can start the adoption process." I nodded, but something gnawed at me. What if Ben doesn't want that? Dan frowned. "What do you mean?" I glanced toward the living room, where Ben sat curled into the corner of the couch, not really watching the show. "He still thinks she's coming back." Dan exhaled. "Can you blame him?" No, I couldn't. The next day, I took Ben out for ice cream, just the two of us. I figured if I was going to have this conversation, it needed to be away from Lisa's curious little ears. We sat outside, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows on the pavement. He barely touched his cone, just picking at the waffle edges. After a while, I said, "You know, when I left home, I kept thinking my parents would come after me." Ben glanced up, frowning. "They didn't." I shook my head. "Not once." He hesitated. Did it hurt?" I smiled sadly. "Yeah. But eventually, I realized something: people don't change just because we want them to." He stared at his ice cream, silent. I reached over, nudging his arm gently. "She's not coming back, Ben." His shoulders tensed. I waited, gave him space. Then, in a whisper, he asked, "Why didn't she want us?" It felt like my heart cracked right down the middle. I wanted to tell him she was broken, selfish, incapable of love, but none of that would fix the hole she'd left in him. So instead, I said, "It's not about you, kid. It never was." His breath hitched. He wiped at his eyes, pretending it was just the sun in them. For the first time, he didn't argue. That night, I found him in Lisa's room, tucking her in even though she'd already fallen asleep. He looked up at me, hesitant. I can still take care of her, you know, even if we stay here. I crouched next to him. You don't have to take care of her alone. A long pause. Then, finally, he nodded. It wasn't a grand declaration, no dramatic breakthrough, but it was something. And for now, that was enough. The day CPS officially granted us permanent custody, Lisa threw a party in the living room. Not a real party. Of course, just her, Ben, Dan, and me, sitting on the floor with paper crowns she'd made out of construction paper. She declared herself the queen of the couch again and made Dan her royal knight, which he accepted with a dramatic bow. Ben didn't join in, but he sat close, watching with quiet amusement. That was enough for me. After Lisa fell asleep, Dan and I found Ben in the kitchen, staring at the papers we had signed earlier, the official confirmation, proof that they were staying. I braced myself, expecting questions, maybe even resistance. Instead, he looked up and said, "So, this means we're not foster kids?" I smiled. "Nope. This means you're home." Something flickered across his face, relief maybe, something softer. Then, without a word, he nodded and walked away. It wasn't much, but for Ben, it was huge. I should have known peace wouldn't last. 2 weeks later, she called. I was at work when my phone buzzed, an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in my gut told me to answer. Mel. Jen's voice came through, thin and shaky. "Hey." My grip on the phone tightened. "What do you want?" A sigh. "Look, I know you're mad, but..." "Mad?" I nearly laughed. "You dumped your kids on my doorstep in the middle of the night." "I think I'm past mad." Silence. Then carefully, she said, "I heard you're trying to adopt them." I froze. "Where did you hear that, Mom?" Of course, I forced myself to stay calm. "Yeah, we are." She exhaled sharply. "You don't have to do that. I'll be back soon. I can take them." Anger surged through me. "Oh, so now you care?" "I always cared," she snapped. Things got complicated, okay?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Ben was making sure Lisa had food. He was checking the locks every night because he was afraid someone would break in. "That's not complicated, Jen. That's neglect." She scoffed. "You don't get it." "No," I said, voice cold. "I don't, because I would never do that to them." She went quiet again. For a second, I thought she'd hung up. Then, softly, she said, "I messed up." I closed my eyes, exhaustion settling deep in my bones. "Yeah, you did." Another pause. Then, in a voice so small I almost didn't recognize it, she whispered, "Do they hate me?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell her they never wanted to see her again. But that wasn't the truth. "They don't hate you," I admitted, "but they don't trust you, and they shouldn't." A shaky breath. "Can I talk to them?" "No," she inhaled sharply. "Mel, no, Jen. You don't get to waltz in and confuse them. They're okay now. I'm not letting you mess that up." Her voice hardened. "They're my kids." I clenched my jaw. "Not anymore." Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Finally, she muttered, "You'll regret this," and hung up. I stared at my phone, my heart pounding. Maybe years ago that threat would have shaken me. But now I had 2 kids who needed me. A husband who had my back. A life I had built without her. I put my phone down and let out a breath. I wasn't afraid of Jen anymore. Jen didn't call again. At first, I half expected another knock at the door. Another desperate plea from my parents. Another scheme to rope me back into their chaos. But nothing happened. No calls, no emails. No last-minute court battle for the kids. Just silence. For the first time in my life, Jen was truly gone. And maybe, deep down, I had always been waiting for that moment, the final, undeniable proof that she wasn't coming back. But instead of feeling relief, I just felt done. Done with the guilt, the frustration, the years of waiting for people to be something they weren't. I wasn't waiting anymore. A month later, Dan and I sat in a courthouse, holding hands as the judge finalized the adoption. Lisa practically vibrated with excitement, kicking her legs under the chair, grinning from ear to ear. When the judge asked if she was happy to be adopted, she threw her arms up and yelled, "Yes," loud enough to make everyone laugh. Ben, though, he was quiet, watching, processing. I could tell he was still scared to believe it was real. But when the judge looked at him and said, "Congratulations, Ben. You've got a forever home," something in his shoulders loosened. And then, Finally, he smiled. That night, we celebrated with pizza and ice cream, because Lisa insisted that family parties always have ice cream. Dan lifted his glass. To the newest members of the family, Lisa beamed. Ben ducked his head, but I saw the way his lips twitched, the way his fingers relaxed against the table. After dinner, I tucked Lisa in, kissing her forehead as she snuggled under her blankets. "Love you, Auntie Mel," she mumbled sleepily. My chest ached in the best way. "Love you too, baby." When I walked into Ben's room, he was already in bed, but awake, watching me. I hesitated. "You okay?" He nodded. Then, after a beat, quietly asked, "Can I call you Mom?" I felt my breath hitch. I had never expected it, not from him. Lisa had latched onto me easily, but Ben had been guarded, careful, and I never wanted to push. But now, here he was, looking at me like he was still half afraid I'd say no. I sat beside him, smoothing his blanket. "Only if you want to," he swallowed. "I do." I cupped his face gently. "Then yeah, kid. You can call me Mom." He nodded again, just once. Then he rolled over, pulling the blanket up, his breathing slow and steady. And I just sat there for a moment, letting it sink in. Not because I had won something, not because I had proven my parents wrong, or beaten Jen, or done what they never could, but because I had chosen this life. We had chosen each other. And for the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was home. Story 2. This narrative has a title. My sister insisted I give her my dream house that I spent 2 years developing just because she became pregnant. She twisted the entire family against me when I refused, though, until they realized the truth. This is a throwaway account because certain individuals involved know my primary, and this whole incident is still very fresh. I apologize for any formatting problems on mobile devices as well. Man, where do I even start with this disaster? I am a 31-year-old man who never imagined that I would be sitting here looking at my own home and wondering how in the world my own sister nearly snatched it from me. But here we are. I guess I should start with the house. The home? The one I literally created with my own 2 hands. Each and every nail, every board, every small detail. Say, I've been in construction since I was basically a kid. Began at the age of 19 as the man who carried things around and swept up sawdust. All of the actual workers shout at him to get them tools, you know. Yes, I was that person. But I pushed my ass, learned all I could. I rose through the ranks from site cleanup to crew leader. Now I operate my own construction firm. I'm not attempting to brag or anything, just giving you the context here. Anyway, about 2 years ago, I found this perfect piece of land. When I say perfect, I mean perfect. 5 acres of complete chaos. Like, imagine if Mother Nature had a garage sale and just dumped everything in one spot. Everyone said I was crazy to buy it. My realtor genuinely attempted to persuade me out of it. Looking back, should have kept that energy when other stuff went down, but we'll get to that. But man, the view. I hope you all get to see it. Our neighbor, Miss Esme, this sweet 70-something lady who's basically become my unofficial grandma, was the only one who got it. Every weekend when I was clearing the land, she would bring me these delicious dumplings. "You have vision," she'd add in her terrible English, gesturing at the mountains. "You see home, others see mess." For months, I just cleared that land on the weekends. We're talking sunlight to sunset, covered in dirt, scrapes everywhere. Sweating alone probably caused me to lose 10 pounds. In their free time, my crew assisted, paid them well. Obviously, I'm not that sort of boss, but mostly it was just me, my tools, and Miss Esme's dumplings. Started building the actual house about 6 months in. Drew up the arrangements with my then wife, Kate, 29 female. She's an architect, which is how we met. Actually, that's sort of a funny story. Well, that was amusing once. Now it simply makes me want to hit a wall. Anyway, she planned the house to be precisely what we both desired. A bespoke construction with a big kitchen island she had always dreamt of, and a workshop constructed exclusively for me to tackle problems. Miss S. May would observe the house gradually rising from her garden next door. She'd wave every morning when I got there, as well as each evening after I left. She would occasionally pull out her tiny folding chair and observe me at work, remarking on this combination of Mandarin and English that I gradually began to learn. Solid base. She'd say the house took 2 years to complete. Everything was put into it, including extra money and free time. I'm referring to custom. Everything. The type of details you can only get when you're creating it yourself, and don't have to worry about contractor shortcuts. I still remember how fucking proud I was when we finally finished it. At that point, everything was perfect. The house was done. Kate and I were content. And Lisa, my 32-year-old sister, was simply my a little obnoxious sister who lived in the city and sometimes took out loans that she never paid back. God, I was so fucking naive. Everything changed when my dad died. It was a regular Tuesday. Nothing special about it. He was expected to visit and inspect the house that weekend. Had been bugging me about seeing the finished workshop. Instead, I got a call from my mom at 2 a.m. Heart attack. As simple as that. Gone. You know that sensation when something so massive happens that your brain just refuses to absorb it? Yes, that. I recall standing in my lovely new kitchen, still on the phone with Mom, gazing at this dumb coffee cup Dad had gotten me as a housewarming gift. It was the funeral. Well, it was a funeral. Mom was struggling to keep her composure. Lisa, my sister, was a total mess. This is where the strangeness began. Mom started dating again like crazy quickly. Just 2 months have passed since Dad's death. This guy Steve shows up at our family house one day, and suddenly he's just there all the time, moving his stuff in, rearranging Dad's garage, acting like he owned the place. Whatever Mom said, we should be understanding that she needed companionship. But Lisa, man, oh man, Lisa took it hard, started showing up at family dinners, completely plastered. To be honest, her fiancé, Mark, who is a good man, escaped a gunshot. When she hurled a wine glass at him during a dispute over wedding decorations, he finally had enough. Left her for his yoga instructor or Pilates teacher or whatever. Good for him, really. So there's Lisa, fresh off losing Dad and getting dumped crying on our front porch at midnight. All we had to support Kate and her family was her. It's also only temporary. Miss Esme really called me aside when she spotted Lisa lugging boxes in poor energy. She shook her head as she said, "That one delivers storm clouds." It appeared to be all right at first. Kate became very close to Lisa, like weirdly close. They do these movie nights, go shopping together. All that landmark movie sister-in-law. Bullshit. However, Lisa would use my purchases to prepare these extravagant feasts and tell Kate all these stories about our childhood. Stories that are mostly made up, but at the time, I was unaware of it. Meanwhile, I was working my ass hard, trying to secure this large deal that would truly put my firm on the map. Coming home late most nights, leaving early in the morning, Kate started making these small remarks about how I was never around. "You were always like this, and maybe you're too focused on work," Liza adds. But then I started noticing odd transactions on our common credit card. Spa days, upscale dining establishments, shopping excursions. All the while, Liza was purportedly seeking employment. Kate denied all of the accusations. It's not that much money, and she's going through a difficult moment. Additionally, stop being so domineering. Then the celebration began. My house looked like a crime scene after a few of Liza's friends first dropped by, followed by a few more, and finally full-blown ragers. I'd come home to cigarette burns on my deck, empty beer bottles scattered in my workshop, and random people passed out on my couch. And every single time, Kate brushed it off. She simply needs some time to relax. It's not harmful. It wasn't innocuous, though. The parties weren't simply parties. She had them in her plan. It began to seem more and more like I was the visitor in my own house. As she invited more guests, she began to remark casually that this house was too large for only 2 people. Or since I essentially live here now, perhaps we should all go in for groceries. I initially believed it to be her typical entitlement, but then I realized Lisa wasn't simply crashing at my apartment. She was making her mark. She was making it harder for me to kick her out when I brought it up to Kate. I got the usual justifications. She's just getting back on her feet. There is nowhere else for her to go. However, Lisa had no desire for stability. She was laying the groundwork for something bigger, and I was the only one who saw it. Then it got so bad. Like, one day I was at a job site 3 hours away, monitoring this massive commercial development. I got a notification from my security camera at like 2 a.m. I shit you not when I click on it. A man is backflipping into my koi pond. Kate immediately requested a peaceful water feature, so I spent 3 weekends creating it. If she doesn't answer, give Lisa a call, directly to voicemail. Finally got through to Kate at 2, 4:30 a.m. Oh, it's just a small get-together. I can actually hear what sounds like the whole Jersey Shore cast in the background, she claims. Once more, you're being domineering. You always try to control everything, Liza explains. Fun fact, those koi fish cost $300 each. 3 of them were killed by the backflip guy. Because I was furious about it, Kate accused me of being materialistic. The fish that she desired that I spent my money on. Make sense of it. However, the parties were only the start. Liza began this strange campaign of innocuous remarks and remarking. She would say things like, "Remember when you pushed Tommy Stevens off his bike in 3rd grade?" After waiting until Kate was within earshot. "You've always been so irate. Tommy Stevens wasn't pushed by me. He fell after hitting a rock. I was just standing there. Kate is really courageous to let you manage the money. After what occurred with Dad's business, nothing happened with Dad's business. Up to the day of his death, it was successful." "Oh, you're working late again?" "There are some things that never change. I was working late to compensate for the damage her pals kept inflicting to my house." And Kate ate it all up. I began to get these worried stares at every single syllable. When I discovered cigarette burns on my custom cabinets or empty bottles in my workshop, I would become irate. Started suggested I talk to someone about my rage issues. Yes, because it seems that these days, not wanting inebriated strangers to ruin your house is a source of rage. I eventually asked Lisa one evening after returning home to yet another mess, "What is the duration of your intended stay?" She hardly looked up from her phone. "I'm not sure. I can remain as long as I need to," Kate said. Kate, who had entered, let out a sigh. She's still getting her bearings. Maybe just give her some space. As if my presence bothered you so much, I wiped my eyes and said with exaggerated enthusiasm, "Perhaps I should simply go." Kate melted instantly. "You don't need to go anyplace, Lisa. If the issue is that serious, perhaps you should spend a few days at a friend's house to get some fresh air." I blinked. "My friend's room's in the house I constructed." Kate scowled. "Just saying. Perhaps a small area would help everyone relax." I watched Kate, waiting for a glimpse of self-awareness to appear on her face as she realized what she had just suggested. Nothing. The rage blazed blazing hot for a moment, not only at Lisa, but also at Kate, who made me feel alienated in my own damn house, defended her with ease, and dismissed my annoyance with such casualness. Lisa was keeping a close eye on me. She desired a response, wanted me to snap so she could act like the victim once more, and explain why Kate thinks I'm a monster. In order to avoid giving her that satisfaction, I clenched my jaw and forced my shoulders to relax before turning to leave. The worst thing was that every time I questioned Lisa, she would act completely innocent. "Oh, I didn't mean it like that," or "I'm simply worried about you," or my personal fave, Kate, "I'm afraid of him." Complete with a trembling lip and fake tears, she began moving furniture, rearranging decorations, and organizing my workshop, among other things around the house. When I'd get mad, Kate would say I was overreacting and being territorial. Then Lisa started inviting people over like a different man every week type of thing. They'd arrive up late at night looking like extras from a horrible reality show. One of them really tried to give me advice concerning my own residence. "This wall might look nicer in chartreuse, you know. First of all, who the fuck says chartreuse? Second, who the fuck asks you, Miss S?" I started keeping a record of all the cars that would come up at our house, make, model, license plate, everything. "Evidence," she'd say, touching her temple. "Always keep evidence." Things started getting worse. For example, when Lisa chose to swap out all of our family photos for old ones of her and me as children. When I discovered my wedding pictures in a box in the garage, I became outraged. She started crying. "See how he gets, Kate? Like we did as children. Remember what Dad used to say about his temper?" Dad never said anything about my temper, because I never had one until Lisa started playing these games. One time I got home to find Lisa had rearranged my entire studio, every tool out of place. When I rightfully lost my shit, my project materials got jumbled up and my meticulous organizing method was totally wrecked. She broke down in tears as she said that she was only attempting to assist and had no idea how much it would distress me. In fact, I had to apologize to Kate. Then things really began to go wrong. Kate stopped cleaning, stopped cooking, stopped doing anything around the house. "Really? I need to live a little," she'd remark, heading out with Lisa and these groups of males. They'd met someplace. She occasionally arrived home late, not until I tried to speak with her about it in the morning. She simply waved me away. I'm sick of being the ideal housewife while you spend your days at work. Help me see, Lisa, I also deserve to enjoy myself. Mrs. May, my MVP, old neighbor, really caught Lisa tampering with our schedule board one day. I caught her deleting and rewriting things through the kitchen window. When Mrs. May informed me, I attempted to tell Kate, but guess what? Mrs. May is probably perplexed. Or she probably just saw Lisa updating the board. Or my preferred one. Why are you attempting to incite opposition against my friend? Yeah, my friend. Because that's what Lisa had become. The new best friend of my wife. They had inside jokes, now shared looks. Kate started dressed differently. Started utilizing these strange sentences Lisa said while wearing these skimpy clothes she had chosen. It was like witnessing someone slowly become indoctrinated in real time. One evening, I got down with Kate and explained everything: the changes, the strange manipulation, and the way Lisa was manipulating things. I confided in her that I thought my wife was being replaced by a deranged version of my sister. She simply sighed, gave me a theatrical look, and claimed I was overanalyzing things. That Lisa was assisting her in escaping, that she had been a good influence on her. I told her it didn't feel like that. I told her that I felt like I was being replaced by Lisa. Kate chuckled. In fact, I laughed. She shook her head and remarked, God, you sound so paranoid. I'm finally enjoying my life instead of being your little housemaid. I realized I was losing more than just my house when Lisa helped me see what I was missing. I was also losing my wife. So there I was, already coping with this manipulative circus. During one of Lisa's elegant dinner parties, she dropped the mother of all bombs. The ones she kept tossing my money at in my house, you know. Imagine this. I'm fatigued from a 12-hour day at a construction site. About 15 strangers were seated around my dining table, eating food that I had purchased with my credit card, while Lisa stood there wearing an expression that I had come to fear. She uses a fork to tap her glass. I shivered and told her she was expecting. Let the squeals, the congrats, and the gasps begin. Kate practically bursts into tears of happiness. Everyone is embracing, discussing nursery colors, and organizing baby showers. Wait a fucking minute, I'm thinking as I stand still in my work boots. Two things are taking up all of my thoughts. Who is the father? And how did this ever happen? You see, Mrs. May's notebook was useful in this situation. Remember how she'd been keeping track of all Lisa's visitors? In other words, the time frame was completely off. Plus, I'd literally seen her shooting shots at one of her parties, like 4 days earlier. She instantly starts talking about transforming my workshop into a nursery, not the guest room. I constructed this enormous mansion, and none of the other 3 extra rooms are available. Not at all. Had to be my workshop. And Kate. Man, oh man. Kate supported it wholeheartedly. It's flawless. The natural light, the space, she repeated. This weekend, we can begin the process of emptying it out. We can begin removing it. My workshop, which I constructed myself, in my own fucking house, for my own projects. Lisa also went overboard. Started wearing these flowing clothes, going around with her hand on her tummy, moaning about morning sickness, which weirdly only manifested when I was around. She even purchased one of those pregnancy apps, and each week she would reveal the baby's fruit or vegetable size. It's a lime. She would make the announcement while having sushi for breakfast this week. She believed that I had missed her Uber Eats order, the true red flag. She wouldn't identify the father. Stated that she didn't want to include him until she was ready and referred to it as her personal adventure. Kate justified this too. She would say it's her decision. Quit passing judgment. Then the demands began. My workshop had to be cleared out promptly since paint fumes are dangerous for the baby. It doesn't matter if I installed a ventilation system, particularly for the workshop. Because she had to be near the ensuite bathroom due to morning sickness, she needed the master bedroom. Family must stay together, so Kate and I could move into the guest room. Mrs. May continued to shake her head as she saw all that was happening. One morning she found me in the driveway and handed me a security camera she'd put up facing our house. At night, keep an eye on the bathroom window, she suggested. Snake forgets to fake sick when she thinks no one is watching. Sure enough, this chronically morning sick pregnant woman was having full-on dance parties in the bathroom at 2 a.m. However, Kate accused me of stalking and violating Liz's privacy when I attempted to show her the video. When Kate wasn't there, I once saw her sipping champagne. What did she say? During pregnancy, one drink is acceptable. Stop being so domineering. This is why I can't tell you who the father is. You're too critical. She then began to complain about how my anger aura was raising her blood pressure and how my bad energy was harming the baby. She even began to act as though she might faint or feel lightheaded anytime I questioned her about anything. It made my blood boil to hear this. I stared her full in the eye and said, "Quit the act. You're not going to faint, and you're not going to use guilt to make me back off. Who is the father?" She let out a sigh as if I were wearing her out. "You see, I don't tell you things for precisely this reason. You're so hostile all the time." I chuckled. "Do you mean that I pose simple queries and anticipate sincere responses?" Needless to say, she ignored me, probably hoping I'd drop it. I didn't. "You're residing in my home, consuming my food and pressuring my wife to go above and beyond for you. You're still unable to be truthful." Without any delay, she took out her phone and pressed the record button. Whoa, simply amazing. "Do you always speak to pregnant women like this?" Her voice was all fake shock. Her eyes darted to the television as if she were constructing her argument. "It makes sense why I feel so uneasy here." I froze for a second, then scoffed. "Are you serious? Are you presently recording me?" She grinned, as if she had just won a devious game. She was the only one playing. Gotta protect myself. Never know when I'll need proof of how aggressive you are. And just like that, I realized this wasn't just about dodging my questions. She was preparing something. But I couldn't just kick her out like that. Then came the nursery planning. Kate and Liza spent hours looking at paint samples and baby furniture catalogs, using my credit card to order custom baby furniture for a baby that anyone with 2 brain cells to rub together could see didn't exist. But the real shit hit the fan when they started talking about long-term arrangements. Apparently, because I was never home anyway working to pay for all this trash, it made more sense for Liza to take over the master suite permanently. Kate could remain in her new bestie's wing of the home, and I could have the guest room above the garage. I was already seeing red when I went to retrieve something from the foyer and found a gift sitting on the counter. An Amazon delivery? Nothing strange except it had Liz's name on it, and for some reason I just felt it was something horrible. When I opened it, my stomach fell. A false, pregnant belly. My heart stopped beating. Everything clicked. The lies, the manipulation, the gaslighting. It had all been leading to this. My hands were trembling as I shot photographs, my thoughts rushing through every minute. Every time Kate had stood up for her, I'd questioned my own abilities. Liza has always been the victim. Rage, betrayal, and incredulity. All of it came at me at once. I had to leave that house immediately. After grabbing my keys, I headed directly to Miss S. May's house, needing someone, anybody, to affirm that I wasn't losing my mind. I was sitting in Miss S. May's kitchen, clutching my teacup so firmly that I was afraid it would break. My phone was buzzing, constant notifications flashing up like my entire life was falling in real time. Voicemails, missed calls, and texts, all from Kate. Everything I had discovered had already made my stomach turn, but the sheer number of messages unnerved me. Mrs. May remained silent, simply sipped her tea while keeping that serene, perceptive gaze she always possessed on me. At last, her words were as truthful as the dawn. She whispered, "Cannot remain hidden indefinitely." I exhaled sharply and picked up the phone. Kate's voice was heard for the second time. I knew something was seriously wrong. "You need to come home right now." There was panic in her tone, something unsteady. My gut twisted. I didn't ask questions. I just grabbed my keys and left. When I walked through the front door, I knew immediately that something had changed. Kate was standing in the kitchen, surrounded by a mess of papers, her face pale, her hands shaking. There was no hesitancy, no prelude. She just tossed a stack of printouts toward me. "I found this," she whispered. Lisa left her laptop open. I looked down to the first page, and my blood turned cold. Operation House? It wasn't even subtle. A whole folder on her laptop, dedicated to scamming me out of my own home. Emails to legal aid agencies inquiring about tenant rights and eviction legislation. A thorough schedule on how to claim established residence under state law. A spreadsheet. An actual goddamn chart of procedures she planned to take to guarantee she could never be removed from my residence. Everything was prearranged. Every single manipulation. Every single untruth. A paper titled, "Establishing Residency Legal Protections," which listed the rights of tenants in our state, was shown on the laptop screen. Notes about how, after a certain period, I couldn't legally evict her without a drawn-out process. A summary of how Kate's permission to her remaining might be used as evidence in court. What's the worst? A draft email asking if she had a case to claim the house as a domestic partner asset was sent to a lawyer. With my heart racing, I went through more of the files. Even a timetable, a detailed account of how she may eventually evict me, was provided. Step 1, get Kate firmly on her side. Step 2, persuade Kate that the baby was harmed by my presence. I move into the guest house in Step 3. Step 4 asserts that I had left the house and was hardly there. Step 5, acquire long-term resident status. Step 6 presents a legal argument that the residence now belonged to Kate and her after I departed. I was ill. This went beyond simple manipulation. This takeover was hostile, and I had nearly allowed it to occur. The front door then opened. Liza tossed her suitcase on the couch and entered the room as if she had no worries at all. Doctor's appointments take forever. With a sigh, she extended her arms. When you're faster, you'd assume they'd be faster. She paused in the middle. Her gaze briefly shifted between Kate, myself, and the pile of evidence strewn across the counter. I witnessed it. The instant she knew she was in the trap. Liza, however, was never slow to react. Her face abruptly changed, becoming confused and wide-eyed. "What's with the faces?" she asked, forcing a laugh. "Someone died." I shoved the papers in her direction. "Tell me, please." She sneered after glancing at them for a little moment. "What is this? Some kind of intervention? Because I've already told you, if this is about me staying here, stop acting, Liza." I lost my temper. "Everything is known to us." She blinked. "Do you know what?" Still trembling, Kate snatched up one of the printouts and pushed it in her face. "Liza, the phony pregnancy, the fraud, and your attempt to forcibly exclude my husband from his own house. Everything is known to us." Despite her apparent nervousness, she continued to perform. "Are you serious, my dear?" She uttered a hollow laugh. Forced. "This is crazy. Even so, where did you get this?" "I told you," Kate said, raising her voice. "Your laptop was left open. For the first time, I saw everything." Liza faltered. She stared down at the papers again, her breathing shaky, and then, like clockwork, the tears started. "You're not understanding." Her voice broke as she muttered. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I had to be desperate." I clenched my jaw. In a desperate situation, she nodded furiously. Her lip quivered. "I had nowhere to go. You have no idea what it's like to be abandoned and feel uncared for. You always had everything. I also had nothing." Her voice cracked as she turned to face Kate. "Don't you understand? Do you see why I had to take this action?" Kate remained silent. Liza let out a nervous breath. "All I wanted was a house. All I wanted was to feel secure. And maybe I made some stupid decisions, but I had to. Do you not see?" She sniffed and wiped away imaginary tears. "I never meant to hurt you." With a feeling of disgust, I gazed at her. "It was never your intention to harm me." I pointed around. "You attempted to murder me. My wife was manipulated by you. You painted me as a violent psychopath. For months, you made me believe that I was insane. You attempted to evict me from my own house. Liza, you orchestrated this, one step at a time." Liza gave a head shake, eyes flitting from Kate to me. Weakly, she murmured, "You're twisting everything. You were just caught, I'm afraid. You're rushing now that I interrupted." Her mouth opened, but my phone buzzed before she could say anything. A message from my attorney, whom I had previously retained for a wholly unrelated matter. "Your sister appears to have recently requested an emergency protective order against you both. Claims you're harassing her, and she's afraid for her baby's safety." I slowly looked up. Liza was grinning, and at that instant I understood she had never expected to win. She only needed to make me lose. But she felt she had played the ultimate move by seeking for a protection order, depicting herself as the scared victim of her abusive brother and his unstable wife. It was a last-ditch effort, one more attempt to alter the script before I could expose her. But she misjudged exactly how prepared I was to end this. I didn't waste time stressing. "I gave my lawyer a call," she responded. Don't worry, we're going to flip this whole thing on its head. And we did. My attorney, I'll name her Miss Savage since she earned that title, put up a bundle she referred to as a reality check. She had stolen every cash, every lie, every swindle, and every phony pregnancy test. Everything was there. Her pregnancy props Amazon receipts. She was allegedly on bed rest when the security footage showed her drinking at parties. Miss S. May's notepad, which included the big finale and a list of all the bizarre men that showed up at my house at strange hours. Kate's recording of Liza confessing to the whole fraud, laughing about how she would fabricate a miscarriage to gain sympathy, and claiming residency. We arrived at the courtroom for the hearing on the protection order about then. I wasn't only protecting myself, I was making sure Liza was done. She arrived in full, pathetic victim mode, holding tissues and wearing a false belly strap, seeming frail and defenseless. Her lawyer, who appeared far too arrogant for someone who was going to be demolished, began to babble about Liza's fears for her safety, how Kate and I had emotionally tormented her, how she was under extreme stress due to our violent and hostile actions. At first, the judge appeared somewhat sympathetic. Then Miss Savage delivered the initial blow. The pregnancy was false. The second video shows her having fun, drinking, and laughing while she should have been ill with morning sickness. The third emails purchasing the fake belly, fake pregnancy tests, and even instructions on how to sell the appearance of being pregnant. Kate's recording followed. Liza's entire performance fell apart in that moment, as her own voice boasted in the courtroom about how she was going to con me out of my house, milk, compassion for a fictitious miscarriage, and exploit tenant rights to stay forever. Her face went pale. The judge's entire attitude changed. He rejected the protection order instantly and contacted the DA's office directly from the bench. It turns out that law enforcement is highly interested in tenant fraud and false claims. Liza attempted to flee, actually attempted to waddle, run out of the courtroom in her fake pregnancy belly. Before she could reach the door, the bailiff apprehended her. And in a moment, like out of a goddamn movie, her artificial tummy popped right off in the battle, dropping onto the floor like a deflated alien egg. That was it. The game is over. The DA, charged with many counts of fraud, making fake police complaints, and violating the rights of tenants. She was taken out of the courtroom in cuffs, screaming about how she was being set up while the evidence of her own stupidity was still playing on the courtroom speakers. When I came home, I had one more thing to accomplish, even though I wish I could say that was the end. I didn't say a word to Kate. I didn't have to. She had already taken a seat at the kitchen table and was looking at the ground, the burden of everything. For the first time in months, I'm finally settling in. She seems to fully comprehend what she had done. When I stepped in, she glanced up. "This is something we can resolve." I shook my head and laughed bitterly. "Make this right, Kate. This faucet isn't broken. This is our entire marriage." She stood up swiftly. Her voice was beginning to sound desperate. "But now we have evidence. We can demonstrate her actions to everyone. Do you believe Liza is involved?" I finally let my rage out and snapped. "Liza is a con artist and parasite. That's just who she is. But you were my wife. You were supposed to have my back." She took a deep breath. I believed I was acting appropriately. "What's right?" I waved in the direction of the house. "You let her take over my home. You allowed her to turn on me. While she was plotting to steal everything, you made me believe that I was the issue. And even when the red flags were slapping you in the face, you still defended her." She stepped closer, reaching for my hand, but I pulled away. "Please," she whispered. "I was stupid. I see that now. I'd rather not lose you." I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. "You already did." Her lips quivered as she blinked. "So that's it. For a second, I thought she may dispute, perhaps attempt to fight for this. But then her shoulders slumped and she nodded. "What am I meant to do?" she asked quietly. I folded my arms. "It's not my issue." Her face collapsed, but I didn't waver. There was nothing left for her. Kate packed her things that night. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. She received nothing. The judge wasn't very sympathetic to someone who had helped try to cheat their own husband out of his home and the house. I held on to it. I didn't let them take it from me. This house was built by me. I lay every board, fastened every beam, poured every ounce of my blood, sweat, and effort into it. This wasn't just a house. It was confirmation of all I had worked for. I restored it, cleaned up the mess they had created, repainted the walls, took back the things that had always belonged to me, and replaced the furnishings. Miss S. May said that someone needed to maintain the snake detector and that she was too elderly for new neighbors when she purchased the house next door. She still won't reveal her dumpling recipe, but she did show me how to brew her unique tea. I'm standing on my porch now, taking in the scenery, and I'm not giving up. I can almost laugh about it. Nearly. However, you can be sure that I now verify everyone's background, even the pizza man. That's it. That is all there is to it. Thanks for letting me get this off my chest. Reddit.mss. May, who has been reading these blogs and laughing heartily at all of your comments, deserves special recognition. Edit. Stop asking for Liza's jail information. Even if she deserves it, I won't dox her. Good stories have good endings, like good tea, bitter first, sweet later. Edit to Miss S. May comments. Final update for Edit 3. I'm in therapy, yes. No, I'm not seeking to date. Yes, dumplings are still being made by Miss S. May. No, she has yet to provide the recipe. Story 3. My husband sent me a picture of himself and his 23-year-old girlfriend at our vacation house, along with divorce papers via email. I quietly drank my morning coffee and said, "The house is mine now. Are you certain of that?" And disabled both his email and phone. Little did he know, it was 7:15 a.m. I was in Nashville when I got the email that broke my heart. Unaware that her father had just blown our lives up with a single message, my 1-year-old daughter Emma was blissfully chattering in her high chair. The topic line was straightforward. Let's go on. When I opened the attachment and saw the picture, I nearly spilt my coffee. My spouse of 5 years, Donald, encircled a young, blonde woman who couldn't have been more than 23. Our lake cottage, a vacation property we purchased only a year ago, was in front of them. It was the same house where we had spent many weekends discussing our future plans. The email said, "I now own the house. I've already moved in with Amber. My lawyer will be sending over the divorce papers. Don't struggle with it. I am the owner of the deed." I felt my hands trembling as I placed down my coffee mug. Not out of terror, though. No, this was just my anger building. Donald genuinely believed that he could just give me divorce papers via email and take our vacation house, the house I had purchased with my business's earnings. He was unaware of what was about to happen. I observed our kid playing with her meal, still naive and joyful. I then took a quick look at the framed picture hanging on our kitchen wall. On our wedding day, Donald and I were beaming as if we had everything all out, 5 years of marriage. And he decided to finish it this way, with a picture of himself with a lady almost half my age and a smug email. I inhaled deeply before picking up my phone. Before I clicked block, my finger briefly lingered over Donald's contact details. I then opened my email and replied with 2 short sentences. "Are you certain of that? You should thoroughly review the documentation." I smiled, clicked send, blocked his email, and turned back to my kid. I was constantly undervalued by Donald. He viewed me as the understanding spouse who had helped him with his profession while also starting my own side company. He likely assumed that I would cry and even plead with him to change his mind. But he had overlooked one important aspect of me. Being careless about safeguarding my assets did not lead to the success of my business. In hindsight, I should have anticipated this. There were signs. I ignored minor warning signs because I was too preoccupied with managing our new baby and my expanding business. Over the previous 3 months, Donald had been visiting the lake house on a regular basis for work, saying he required quiet time to work on a major corporate merger. I supported his professional decisions while starting my own business from the ground up. I was already operating a profitable internet store when we first met 6 years ago, but Donald pretended it was simply a fun pastime. He enjoyed sharing with others how he had assisted me in making it a reality. The reality? Since we were married, the worth of my business has tripled, all via my own hard work and strategic planning. I had thought of the lake home, the ideal retreat for our family. It's remote enough to feel like a true getaway, yet close enough to Nashville for weekend getaways. Donald had insisted on having his name appear on the deed for tax considerations, even though I had paid for it in full with the earnings from my business. He said that although I had consented, I had first had my lawyer prepare a number of extremely detailed paperwork pertaining to the real ownership of the property. Donald had been particularly aloof last week, using our home office phone for hours at a time. He became defensive when I questioned him about the merger, accusing me of not comprehending the intricacies of corporate economics. Rich, coming from a guy whose financial portfolio I'd secretly been managing for the previous 3 years, I took up Emma from her high chair and hugged her close, inhaling in her beautiful baby aroma. Her eyes were Donald's, but I was determined. It was already evident in the way she approached each new task. Now that I was looking at her, I was more determined. It was no longer just about me. It was also about safeguarding her future. With Emma on my hip, I made my way to my home office and turned on my laptop. I sent the paperwork indicating I had bought the lake house to my lawyer via email in a matter of minutes. Next, I viewed the stream from the security camera I had put on the property. Another safeguard Donald knew nothing about. Everything had been captured on camera. Each visit, each visitor, each betrayal. Amber may have been celebrating her win at the lake home, but she was unaware that she was the subject of a film that would play a significant role in my divorce case. It buzzed on my phone. Julia, my helper Rachel, texted me. "This is something you must see." A link to Amber's Instagram page was included. Dozens of pictures of her with Donald dated back months. She even wore my clothing and used my belongings in several of the photos that were taken in our bedroom at the lake house. In the most recent post, she was seen showing off a huge diamond band that belonged to my grandmother. Donald had promised that we would give Emma the ring on her 18th birthday. I was ill. This was not a new incident. Before Emma was even born, this had been happening. 8 months ago, Amber proudly displayed a key to the lake house in one of the pictures. "Reading home, sweet home, with my eyes and love heart," as a caption. Moving in together is a new phase. When our infant kept me up all night. A woman who had just graduated from college had been playing house with Donald. His professional travels coincided exactly with the dates on the pictures. He had always stated that he needed to check on the lake cottage, which was why he was working late every weekend. All of it had been false. My hands are trembling. I launched the banking app. The second blow came at that moment. I put money into a joint account for Emma's college fund, but it was empty. Every cent, almost $100,000, lost. Transferred out yesterday to an account I didn't recognize. The wrath I'd felt before turned into something cold and calculated. I phoned my bank immediately, then my lawyer. I had confirmation in an hour. For months, Donald had been methodically transferring funds in anticipation of this day. He had even attempted, but failed, to access my company accounts. At least those were safeguarded by separate financial systems and unbreakable contracts. I was talking to the attorneys on the phone when Rachel phoned. "Julia, there's more." A number of screenshots from Amber's private Facebook page were forwarded to me by her. The girl had been boasting to her pals about how she had found a wealthy older guy and how they intended to demand the full value of his uninteresting wife. Even jokes about how unaware I was and how preoccupied I was with my small internet store to see what was going on were included in the communications. They had no idea that my small internet store had tripled my fortune. In order to give Donald the impression that my company was only successful and not extremely profitable, I had kept that knowledge secret. He had never been able to examine my company's books well enough to fully comprehend what I had created because of his ego. I glanced at Emma, who was now soundly sleeping in her playpen. "Don't worry, darling daughter," I whispered. "Daddy is going to learn a valuable lesson from Mommy about the undervaluation of women in the corporate world." Over the following several hours, I was quite busy. Sarah, my lawyer, showed up to my house shortly before noon, and we sat in my home office going over paperwork. Emma and Rachel had a snooze upstairs while maintaining watch. I had increased the house's security. I had a feeling Donald wouldn't accept my email reply. He's not as smart as he believes, though. Looking over the lake home paperwork, Sarah said, "We have unquestionable evidence that your company's finances were used to buy the home, even if the deed is in his name. The contracts, the transfer documents, and even the emails in which he acknowledges that it was your money. Everything is here." I pulled up my laptop security camera feeds and nodded. "There's more. Take a look at this." Throughout the previous months, the video captured Donald and Amber coming inside the lake house at different occasions. However, Sarah was particularly intrigued by the video that was shot 2 days ago. It included Donald hauling box after box of household goods, including a few artworks I had bought with the money I made from my business. Sarah noted that it was an attempt to steal company property. For tax reasons, the art collection was bought via your business. The paperwork is with us. At that moment, a call from an unidentified number appeared on my phone. I switched it to speaker mode. Don't you think you're really intelligent? Donald's tone was abrasive and irate. Julia, check your work email. My solicitors have also been quite busy. I felt sick to my stomach as I opened my email. In an emergency petition, Donald's solicitors claimed that my company was founded on his contacts and experience. During the divorce process, they were requesting temporary control of my company's finances, as well as a thorough audit. You would make a sincere effort to keep me company. My heart was pounding, but I spoke steadily. I founded the business before I ever met you. You constructed. He chuckled icily. Who do you believe provided you with all of these business contacts? Who put you in touch with the appropriate people? Without me, Julia, you would be nothing. Amber is aware that she knows how to express gratitude. Sarah was already typing frantically on her laptop when I turned to her and silenced the phone. She gestured with her finger. Hold on, Donald. The phone was unmuted by me, purchasing time. Give your actions a lot of thought. Yes, my solicitors will contact me regarding Emma as well. You can't be a good mother because you're too preoccupied with your valuable business. Amber gets along well with children. She was a nanny once. The idea of taking Emma chilled my blood, but Sarah brought her laptop to me before I could reply. A 3-year-old email that Donald had sent to a buddy bemoaning my success was displayed on the screen. She doesn't need my assistance because she will not even consider my business advice. She is correct. Her business is now worth more than my yearly wage. It's embarrassing. Into the phone, I grinned. I just emailed your lawyer something, Donald. Before threatening my business further, you might want to ask him, what are you discussing? Let's pretend you didn't realize how private your email archives were. Call off your solicitors, or I'll send your boss an email next. What would he think of all those business relationships you say you've given me? There was silence on the queue. Next, click. Rachel rushed into the office with a pale face as Sarah was still going through Donald's emails. You must see this immediately, Julia. She pushed her iPad across from me. A draft press statement from Donald's business announcing his elevation to Chief Financial Officer, effective next month, was shown on the screen. All of a sudden, everything fell into place. The aggressive legal campaign, the deliberate actions with our finances, and the timing of his romance with Amber. It was more than simply abandoning me. Prior to his major promotion, he was cleaning house in an effort to protect his assets and reduce the amount of money he would lose in a divorce. There's more. Rachel flipped to a different page. Amber is not your typical girlfriend. She is the niece of the CEO. It seemed as though someone had hit me in the stomach. There was no younger lady that Donald had fallen in love with. In order to get promoted, he had planned a connection with the CEO's niece. The stolen money, the lake mansion, including the Emma-related threats. All of this was part of his plan to begin a new life with his ideal, well-connected young bride as a CFO. Sarah raised her head from her computer. I discovered something else, Julia. Donald has been involved in the corporate merger. One of your main rivals in business is involved. He will have access to information that might cause significant harm to your business if he is appointed CFO. I balled my hands into fists. Donald wasn't only attempting to harm me. He was setting up shop to demolish everything I had constructed. I thought about all those nights he'd spent in his home office claiming to be working on merger agreements. Instead, has he been looking through my business files? Verify the activities on my home network? I informed Rachel. Pay attention to any efforts to get access to my company's servers. Sarah discovered something more while Rachel was at work. Take a look at these 6-month-old emails that Donald and Amber exchanged. Even before Emma could walk, they were making plans for this. Amber wrote, "We can utilize the insider knowledge to force Julia's business out of the market once you're CFO. Uncle Robert promises to assist." The thought of them conspiring against me while I was taking care of our newborn baby made me feel nauseous. However, they had become careless due to their conceit. They had left a trail of evidence that may damage the CEO's reputation, in addition to Donald's advancement. My thoughts were interrupted by Rachel's words. I located it. Donald's laptop made many attempts to access your company's servers. Although he tried, he was unable to breach your security. Corporate espionage is what that is. I got up and went to the window to see Emma play with her favorite plush elephant in her playpen. Donald believed he was very smart for securing his future through his connection with Amber. However, he had overlooked the most crucial business lesson. Sarah, you should never undervalue your opponent. I consult my lawyer once again, write a letter to the board of directors of the firm, and include proof of Donald's attempted corporate espionage and the CEO's use of insider knowledge against a rival. Include the security tape showing Donald robbing the lake cottage of business property. How about Amber? Rachel inquired. I grinned glumly. The way their CEO employed a family member to assist in planning corporate espionage would likely pique the board's curiosity. Do you not? My phone rang with a lake house security system alarm just as we were getting ready to send the email to the board. Donald had returned, and he was not by himself. Amber was not alone with him. Her uncle Robert, the CEO, was also present. They entered the house carrying boxes. More of my stuff, of course. Watching the live broadcast, I encouraged Sarah to wait. Let's first observe their actions. We could see them in the living room through the security cameras. The sound was really clear, another element that Donald was unaware of. Glasses in hand, they were enjoying champagne. For the aspiring CFO, to Donald and my lovely niece who made it all possible, Robert lifted his glass. Julia doesn't know what's going to happen. Donald chuckled. The board will announce my promotion tomorrow morning, and by the afternoon, our legal team will have access to her company's financial records for auditing purposes. Her business will be useless in a month. What's the best part? Amber added her voice. Her biggest issue, in her opinion, is the lake house. Hold off until she learns of the offshore accounts. I went cold. Rachel, what? Offshore accounts? Rachel tapped her keyboard quickly. Her face darkened in a matter of minutes. Located them. For months, Donald has been transferring funds from your joint accounts to foreign assets, not just the money for Emma's college. Somehow, he was able to divert about $300,000. I didn't realize how big this was. Donald wasn't only preparing to abandon me. For months, he had been routinely robbing our family. The drama surrounding the lake home was only a diversion from his larger plan. Robert then uttered something that chilled me to the bone. Once Julia's firm tanks, our merger goes through effortlessly. Our subsidiaries will share her market share, and her problematic ethical business model will be a thing of the past. In addition to becoming profitable, my company's dedication to fair labor and ecological methods was upending their whole sector. This went beyond Donald's romance and his promotion. Because it endangered their economic model, they sought to demolish what I had constructed. I instructed Sarah to send the email, but first add one more item. Go to Emma's birthday backup server password and attach the Mark Insurance file. When Sarah opened the file, her eyes sprang wide. It had years' worth of records regarding dubious activities at Donald's business, data that I had acquired while overseeing his financial account. I never imagined that I would need it, therefore I had saved it as insurance. Julia. Rachel looked at her screen and interrupted. Donald recently made another attempt to log into our company's servers from the lake residence. He's becoming desperate. I saw Donald excuse himself to the home office via the camera. My office at home. Our IT staff was prepared when he sat at my desk, most likely attempting to breach my company account once more. They'd established a phony doorway, letting him think he was succeeding. I told Rachel to let him in. Let him believe he is. Because their entire house of cards collapses in around 10 minutes after that board email is sent. Sarah raised her head from her computer. Are your emails ready? Shall I press the send button? I glanced at the security footage one final time. Robert, Donald, and Amber were still rejoicing over their fictitious triumph. Take action. The speed of the response exceeded my expectations. Robert's phone rang through the security stream just minutes after Sarah sent the email. As he listened to what I imagined was the board's initial response, we saw his face become pale. Are you referring to an urgent meeting? He called out into the telephone. What proof was sent by whom? Presumably checking his email, Donald reached for his own phone. He lost the color in his face. She knew the servers. Julia was aware of my attempt to gain access to them. It improves. As we watched the drama play out, I murmured to Sarah, await it. Amber's phone began exploding with alerts just in time. All of the board members had received anonymous, private Facebook messages from her. The ones where she boasted that she had assisted Donald in stealing company data. The precise moment their joy descended into terror was captured on the surveillance camera. Robert yelled into his cell phone. Donald was hurriedly attempting to close his laptop, and Amber was in tears, mascara flowing down her cheeks. The coup de grace followed. Police vehicles driving up to the lake, home, lights blazing. It turns out that financial fraud and business espionage are significant offenses. Who could have known? As we watched via the cameras, I took Emma in my arms and hugged her close. Take a look at that newborn girl. That is the result of others undervaluing your mother. Before the broadcast stopped, the last thing I saw was Donald being released in handcuffs while continuing to yell that the home belonged to him. The aftermath was stunning. Robert and Donald were both dismissed within a day. The board's inquiry revealed years of fraudulent activities in addition to the conspiracy against my firm, which I was unaware of. Amber's promising influencer career was ruined by her involvement in corporate espionage. She had returned to Ohio to live with her parents, as far as I knew. Investigations were conducted and the offshore accounts were blocked. Donald was given back all of the money he had taken, plus interest. As it turns out, trying to steal corporate property is a wonderful way to forfeit any property rights. The deed was moved to my name as it ought to have been from the beginning. Donald made an effort to apologize, sending long emails explaining how he had lost himself and how a younger lady in power had tempted him. I never answered. The divorce documents were unambiguous. He lost everything he attempted to pilfer, plus more. He would never again work in finance because of the proof of his corporate espionage. In my case, following the controversy, even more investors were drawn to my firm because of its moral business practices. We entered markets that were previously controlled by Donald's firm. Customers who had lost trust in established organizations were drawn to us because of our reputation for integrity. We now spend weekends at the lake house, creating new memories with Emma. I sometimes think about Donald's arrogant email with that picture while I'm sitting on the balcony watching her play. He believed he was declaring triumph, but in reality, he was only recording the start of his demise. By the way, I saved that email. In my workplace, it is framed, a warning to never underestimate a lady who's established something worth defending.